Welcome. I'm Jessica Rye, Director of Communications for United Launch Alliance. Thank you for joining us today. We have a wonderful announcement and partnership to talk with you about today, and so we're going to get right to the conversation, and then we'll do some Q&A. So I'd like to introduce Mr. Robert Bigelow, founder and president of Bigelow Aerospace.
Thank you, Jessica. Yeah, this is a propitious occasion, as they say, I guess, and we're really happy to be being able to announce a potentially enormously important relationship. So I want to first express my thanks to all of you attending here, and especially to ULA. And this is a great place to have this press conference at the Broadmoor, so it's really appropriate. And I understand that you have all received a press release essentially describing some of the basic areas of this relationship, if I'm not mistaken. I believe you've all received that, so I won't get into specific details about the size of the B330 or those kinds of things, so you understand that there is a collaborative effort here to do a number of things, especially in the last paragraph of that second page. It said a lot. It was a very important area in there. So one of the things I want to do is characterize a little bit this new space era, take a couple minutes, which my perception is that it really began in 2011 when there was the cessation of the flying of the shuttle, because NASA was on an irreversible course at that point in time to go forward and to have a dependency on the commercial sector. And of course there are at least 4 companies that have a lot of promise in being able to perfect their taxi system. And so from a small company perspective like us, that we're focused on the destination, we are totally dependent on the availability of transportation for crew and cargo to and from any of these destinations. So in our perspective, we look at this decade of the new space era being from 2011 to maybe 2021, and what is it that can happen in those 10 years. We have put forth the effort in our company to try to achieve 2 full-scale 330s that will be completed and ready for deployment and be able to be shipped out of Las Vegas in the latter part of 2019 and the very early part of 2020, so they could both be deployed in 2020. And so I had prepared a couple of little notes here, and then I'll talk briefly about something else. So to us, this represents a first phase, this 10 years from 2011 to 2021, that's really pretty darn important. In this new space era, this NSC will be defined by the really serious emergence of space commercialization, obviously aside from satellite communication, and several different new dynamics. For the first time, stations and transportation systems will be available to serve as an open resource. That's a big deal, as an open resource, and not mainly the purview of nations. The majority of Earth's nations and corporations can have access, and that's a big deal. So as a result of affordability and access, new products and everything that affect human health, entertainment, national security, and other areas will be marketed. These new industries will help pay for the future pursuit of eventually lunar enterprises, which will characterize phase 2. And in our world of thinking, that's from 2021 to 2031 of the new space era. NASA is evolving from essentially owning everything to being a commercial customer and a tenant. Excuse me. By the end of phase 1 in 2021, there will be more than a single company able to transport crew and cargo. And then we begin phase 2 of things. Phase 2 is characterized by more LEO stations, more destinations, multiple taxi services that are reliable, efficient, and affordable. and probably a 20-fold increase in the amount of astronauts that are actually working. I believe NASA, excuse me, currently only has maybe a population of about 40 active astronauts, if I'm not mistaken. And that about probably represents a similar number for a global amount of astronauts, at least in maybe setting aside China. But so saying that there's going to be a 10 or 20-fold increase is a substantial number of folks. And we think that that's a function of having more destinations and having at least several of these new transportation companies be successful. I know most of those folks pretty well, and I think there is really a good chance for 4 companies to be active in serving low Earth orbit needs. So we're pretty excited about this. We are looking to, if we have eventually permission, and we're trying to acquire permission from NASA to be able to locate a B330 on station. If we're able to do that and have X-Base be there, we are asking also that we be given consideration to being able to commercialize time and volume. And this is no different than if you have an office building, you have a 30-story office building, and you're trying to lease a number of floors. Maybe a bank is the anchor tenant. Maybe NASA is an anchor tenant, and you have other people. My voice is failing me here. And you have other people that are also lessees. But it also means, there's an opportunity perhaps for branding and naming. So whose name is going to be on the building? and usually it's the anchor tenant. And our model here is to try to avoid people having to write checks for any larger amounts than they absolutely have to. That's the objective, in order to increase the population of users and when it gets down even to the individual. So, and we can talk more about that in terms of concept, but it's the same concept if you were doing a university naming of lecture halls and wings of a building, the building itself, and finally the whole college, the whole school. That college could be named after somebody, and that's a universal way of raising money and acknowledging people, so on and so forth. And there's that huge AT&T football stadium down in Dallas, and they paid a huge fortune for a magnificent facility there, and it's really well worth it, for AT&T to have that exposure. We would love to see Disney have a Disney space station. Wouldn't that be cool? I don't know how many of you here, I'm looking at the age of the audience here, and gee whiz, it seems a whole lot younger than where I am, but I can remember when I was about 14, Walt Disney had his Disney show, and he had the Wernher von Braun on that show several times, and they had Wernher von Braun's rocket there, which was a huge rocket, and they had the big wheel, the AG, the artificial gravity wheel that they talked about. And Walt was a heck of a space fan. He really was. I think he had lived longer, he would have been into space some way or another, probably in some kind of a substantial capacity. So I would love to see a company like that be the vanguard of future stations and operations. So having said that, and my voice is acting up here, I'm going to go ahead and take my seat and turn things back over to Jessica.
So thank you very much for your comments, sir. And now I'd like to introduce Mr. Tory Bruno, ULA President and CEO.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you for coming out. I could not be more excited to stand up here and talk about this partnership with Bob and with Bigelow Aerospace. We are standing on the very threshold of an expanded and permanent human presence beyond our planet. In the beachhead for that future, the foundation will be the commercialization of LEO. And Bob's innovative technology is really the key that's going to unlock that future. This is so exciting. This is going to greatly expand the opportunities for research, for manufacturing, and yes, for space tourism in LEO. We're really talking about the democratization of space, where it will no longer be the sole domain of highly trained and highly skilled and elite astronauts, but a place where people like you and I, where normal, regular men and women go to live and work. And so this is very, very exciting to me, and I am thrilled to be able to announce this partnership and to be able to help Bob by helping to create this transportation highway to the destinations that he is creating. This is a very bright future, and you and I right now are standing here looking right into it. And so with that, I think we're available to take questions.
So yes, please wait for the microphone and state your name and affiliation. We're going to start in the room. We do have some questions online as well. So we'll start here in the front.
Hi, Jeff Faust of Space News for either Mr. Bruno or Mr. Bigelow. Could you elaborate a little bit on exactly what this partnership entails? Is there a launch contract signed here? Is there a letter of intent for a launch? What are the terms of the partnership that's being announced today?
So this is a work in process. We do have an agreement on something that would be typical when you are doing the really early preliminary work in terms of characterization of a payload. But this is very much a work in process in terms of the overall concept and the overall picture, by all means. So we have a lot of work ahead of us, and we intend to work together. And as the press briefing said, you know, that last paragraph on that second page, as I alluded to, really says it all in terms of what we're trying to do together.
I think that you said it.
Let's go back to Chris.
Hi, Chris Davenport from the Washington Post. When you say here that this is the first ever commercial partnership between a launch provider and a habitat provider, you're talking about where NASA is sort of out of the loop, where, I mean, SpaceX just launched your habitat. Can you talk a little bit about the significance of that, where you have companies partnering with companies without a government sort of in the loop there?
Sure. So it's what I was referring to a moment ago, where we're seeing private companies look to commercialize LEO. You know, NASA has done the tremendous exploration work, and they've sort of, you know, blazed that trail, and I think as they look to their future, they talk about pushing further into deep space and counting on industry, on commercial companies to really capitalize and exploit all of that wonderful work that they've done to commercialize LEO. And so we are getting together as private companies to actually, you know, to actually see that vision happen.
Chris, nice to put a face to the name. We have several folks right now that would like to fly things on beam. We have countries and we have corporations. We didn't really try to promote that, beam is more awkward to accommodate commercial payloads, as you might imagine, than the 330 would be. And yet, surprisingly, the notion has been preliminarily vetted with NASA, and so we're getting some cautionary nods, and I'm hopeful that perhaps in 6 months or so, we may be able to accommodate these folks who want to do that. And that would be really exciting, because that would be the proof that there are people that are interested, that even in a very minimal kind of context, being able to be able to fly certain kinds of payloads, and that so it'd be under much more of a hardship by far, 10 times more of a hardship by far, than if they had the 330 to work with and they had their own crew or their own people on board as payload specialists.
Yeah, you know, I just want to say that, you know, Bob's vision that he described before when he was at the podium and here for the business model that you have in mind for the B330 is the thing that I think is the most exciting about it. This is a very innovative idea, and it's one that is really new to aerospace and certainly new to space itself. So, you know, this is innovation, the real thing.
Go here and then back to the second row.
gentleman, Tom Roeder with the Gazette. One thing that fascinates me about this relationship is you have the innovative, young entrepreneurial company getting with the very established, very buttoned-down company. How do you manage the cultures, and how do you balance the tolerance of risk between the two firms?
So can I, if I loosen my tie, will that help?
Well, he didn't notice my age. I mean, I'm old enough to be characterized as an older part in this relationship, right? So, but bless you for not bringing that to anybody's attention.
Well, you know, I always think that good partnerships are ones where both parties bring something to the table. You know, so if we're going to have commercial destinations in space, we have to have a place to go where meaningful activities happen, and we have to have a place, a way to get there and come back. Bob is providing the destination. We have a great track record on going to and from. We have a very capable and powerful fleet of rockets. And when we're talking about people and the frequency that this vision embodies, I think our record is going to be something that's pretty valuable and a big enabler. In the lift industry, people, sort of accept in non-human flight, one failure in 20, even one failure in 10. And the team that I'm privileged to lead and very proud of has achieved 0 failures in 106. And so you need reliable transportation to make this work, and we're bringing that to the partnership. And by the way, that is an amazing craft. That B330 is bigger than my first apartment.
Rand Simberg, Interglobal Media. Bob, have your clients expressed an interest in a location? Will these be co-orbital with each other? Will they be co-orbital with ISS? Will they be somewhere else, or is that TBD?
It's sort of a TBD. We are a little biased toward having this first 330 on station, and that's why we call it X-Base in a sense, because it will provide NASA with the terrific opportunity to have a testing station on station that is really a formidable size. It represents 30% of the existing volume of the station. So how would you be comfortable in outfitting new Eclipse technologies and other kinds of systems when you're a long ways from mama, you're a long ways from home, if you didn't test everything out every which way you could, close to home first?
Physically attached.
So we are hoping that we can get the kind of permissions that are necessary from NASA to say, yes, let's go ahead and attach that to station, and we can try to execute that docking and everything that's required, and have that be a super testing station platform, the B330.
All right, so we're going to go Frank, I saw Frank's hands, we'll go over here and then to the front.
Hi, it's Frank Mooring with Aviation Week. I was a little bit late, but Mr. Bigelow, could you tell what work needs to be done to the 330 before it's ready to attach to the station? What do you have to do to it? And then to continue that same line of questioning, where are you in your development of a free-flying 330?
Okay, so our forte is structures. We know quite a bit, I would probably say a lot, about expandable systems and the metallic interfaces to those systems, and we have been working on these for 15 years. We have flown Genesis 1 and 2 in 06 and 07, and we haven't stopped testing. We haven't stopped innovating. I'm a stickler for the constant regime of testing and more than just ample margins. And you'll ask anybody in the company, and they will shake their head. Oh yeah. So we have a testing regime going on that's extensive this year and next year. We are also developing full-scale development units. We did the 100A, which was a full-scale skeletal structure of all the metallics. We're doing a 100B. We will probably fully populate that in another 6-8 months, and then we will segue into the 200 series, the DS200 series, which is a flight-like, full-scale flight-like unit, and then we will migrate into the 300 series, which is a engineering unit, and it'll be part of the qual. So, and we go through the same kind of have efforts with the soft goods as well. We do more HVI testing, hypervelocity impact testing. We're going to be doing all kinds of control testing on expansions. We do things to destruction. We do long-term duration testing, leak testing, and so on. So if this turns out to be located on the ISS, what we have to be conscious of is cohabitating some of our systems with NASA systems. And NASA may say, well, we don't like the toilet arrangement that you guys have. We are working on one of our own, which is true right now. They'd like to segue away from the Russian having the fame and glory on that. So we are having to provide duality. On board, we have enough room to where you could run simultaneously 2 dissimilar systems if you wanted to. So you could have a very experimental system on there that holds a lot of promise for deep space use and not have all your eggs in that basket.
You're not just talking about toilets, you're talking about eagles, right?
Amen. Yes. I was just using that as a flippant example, which actually is a pretty serious thing.
Jen DeMassio with Aviation Week. What kind of permissions are necessary from NASA? What do you have to get in place?
It's going to go through the process of internal authorities that are required within the NASA hierarchy. It is going to also, they have to consider the partners, the station partners. We experienced this with Beam, that we had to recognize that location is about the most sensitive location in space that there is. So even with Beam, we had to be concerned about perturbations to the entire structure on its expansion, so and NASA was super, super, super cautious about those kinds of things. So this is no small matter of consideration. We're going to have to go through a gauntlet of challenges to be able to achieve that structure being located on station. If it were a free flyer, that we avoid all those kinds of things, but if it can be achieved on station, NASA maximizes the utility of its staff that is already on station. It may also be in a facility that its partners are going to get excited about, because we think this will add life beyond 2024 to the ISS. And there are a lot of folks who do not want to see the ISS go into the drink and feel that, gee, why can't we just add on to this structure and continue the viability of such an expensive investment that the Americans have already made, $100 billion.
Hi, yeah, James Drew with Flight Global. So who is going to pay for this launch when it happens? Are you looking for NASA to sponsor it, or some other agency to sponsor it, or a bunch of entrepreneurs to sponsor it? How are we going to fund the ULA Atlas V launch?
So that depends on how this all works out between now and then. So as Bob said, we're exploring how to accomplish this. Clearly, if there were a NASA-centric mission and NASA wanted to invest in lifting the B330, I would be pleased to work with them, but I think there's other opportunities as well. Such as? I'll let Bob. You talk.
You're so nosy. This is tough to talk about because, we would love to say a lot of things we shouldn't, all right? And it's not appropriate that we talk about too much in details because we are getting ahead of ourselves. We need to cement certain things, even though we have a lot of concepts that are really cool, really exciting, and can do NASA a hell of a favor. It's premature to talk in specifics about these kinds of things.
I guess I'm Bill Young with African American Voice, and I guess my question is around security and safety issues as a private industry. Having the two of you team up without a government, how are you going to resolve those issues, and are they going to be open source so that other companies can kind of be on the same page with you guys when it comes time for them to do similar things?
Okay. I am smiling because you were never around our shop when we were fabricating the beam. NASA was there a lot, and we had a serious amount of insight opportunity. We provided insight with NASA in far as the construction, development, fabrication of the beam was concerned, as opposed to oversight. There's a little bit of a difference there. And so it wasn't as though we were turned loose by any stretch of the imagination. And that's not going to be the case with the 330 either. If it's going to station, NASA's going to be all over that structure. I guarantee it.
Yeah, so I'll just add to that a little bit. You know, safety and reliability is core discipline for us. It's core skills. We take it very, very seriously. And one of our core principles is transparency with our customers. And I'll also share that in our industry, when it comes to safety and people's lives, that there has always been a tradition of cooperation, even between private companies. You know, it's separate from any government requirements, because some things transcend that. Okay.
We're going to go back to take a question from social media.
Thanks. One of the questions from social media on Twitter from @ChuckOGarcia in regards to bringing people and expanding the astronauts that are in space is, what will be the professions of the first 50 off-world jobs we see supported by Cislunar 1000?
Do you want to?
The 50 on jobs? What?
So the first 50 jobs that exist off our planet, the first 50 commercial people who are up there, what do you think they'll be doing, Bob?
All right, so you're going to be driving that from a business perspective. You know, usually you are coming up and creating the ways that you have something to market. So exploration is important. You have to check out what is it that's there, but before you've done that, you have to navigate through the legal regime of being able to secure assets that you find. And if you find in situ assets that you're going to harvest, you're going to transport those someplace, you have to have that permission. We think that kind of permission is not blockaded by the 67 Space Treaty. We think it's in harmony with that. So you're going to have to be locating where there are resources that you can market. In our particular case, our company would like to be the kind of Hudson Bay sort of company. We would like to have the facilities to accommodate people in whatever enterprise is there. If they're mining, if they're exploring for this or that, if we're hosting a country, another nation to explore, then that's what we would like to be able to do, is facilitate those kinds of folks rather than to initiate those kinds of activities ourselves. If there were people putting together power systems or transportation systems, whatever it might be, maybe a rail system of some sort, who knows, or even a launch facility. We would try to accommodate those kinds of folks any way we could, but we actually would leave it up to the professionals in those industries to do that kind of work.
So I absolutely agree with everything that Bob said. And you know, the funnest part about this type of endeavor is that we just don't know. And so I'll speculate too. I'm going to speculate that the first jobs, the first commercial jobs in space, are commercial research, corporate-related or corporate-sponsored space research, and perhaps zero-G manufacturing, and then extending out into prospecting and in the development of resources that are just a week and a half's journey from where we're sitting here. Such abundance that it defies human imagination. But that's what I think, and it's going to be so much fun to find out together.
Okay, we'll go back to questions in the room.
Hi, Miriam Kramer with Mashable. I am just sort of curious, so if the B330 were to attach to the space station, would you expect that NASA would be your customer for that particular module, or would you expect to be able to have other industry partners or other nations? I'm not totally sure how that would work, but yeah.
Our hope is that NASA would be the primary customer for that structure, and that we would be given permission to commercialize, and essentially we would be time sharing. Okay, so what we're doing is we're offering discrete quantities of time, a matter of 1 or 2 weeks to maybe 45 days to various kinds of clientele, and also certain areas on board the spacecraft that we have permission for that clientele to locate packages and experiments that was the motivation for them to be there.
We can take another question from social media and then I'll.
And how exciting was that? Time sharing space. Come on.
Another question from Twitter at Nelson Bridwell is, how many B330s will we see in orbit in the next 5 to 10 years?
So if we have the wherewithal to set up the production facility to create 2 for launch in 2020, we're not about to shut that down. Now, we're light years from being Boeing, so we're not going to be able to produce a 737 in a day, right? Less than a day, actually. So it will take time to create these structures, but as we do, we'll be able to do that more quickly. So I think by, say, you said 2025 or 6, I forget the time frame on that.
The next 5 years.
5 years after the 2020, okay. So that's going to be probably a function of, are we able to find enough good staff to be able to put these structures together in that kind of quantity? That's really, really important, the people. Because this is really a lot about the technicians and the people that put these systems together. So that's a big deal. The financial wherewithal means something. The facilities themselves mean something. Our plant is pretty large, and I built it to accommodate a flow of structures that could be in tandem. So I think we could expect possibly to be able to populate several different destinations in addition to the ISS.
Hi, I'm Tom Sjogren from Explorers Web. So after working with this for the last 15 years or even longer, are you still bound to the soft structures, inflatable structures, or would you be willing to work with rigid structures as well? Or could you expand on how you feel about the 2 differences today?
Until we get to a way of lifting large, heavy structures that is completely different than today. We're almost talking levitation. Unless there is an enormous breakthrough in being able to deploy something from the surface of the Earth to a substantial altitude, there is no way that rigid systems can overcome the advantages of expandable systems. There is just no way they can. And you can look at it almost any different way that you want. And especially if the rigid system, now you may not have the maleffect of radiation on human tissue inside composite systems like you do aluminum systems, but it's disastrous with aluminum systems. And again, your confinement to that structure, because as good as it's going to get, is what the size was in that fairing upon deployment, upon launch, and that was what you got on deployment, and that basically is it. You could have certain articulation of different things, but in terms of overall volume, it's going to be the same. And that's the beauty of expandable systems, is it's not the same. There's no relationship at all as to what you started out with in the size of what it's going to be when it's deployed.
And from the perspective of the lift person, the expandable structure is the innovation that is making this possible. That's the breakthrough. Because all space structures that go up have to fit underneath the rocket's payload fairing. And physics dictate a limitation to that, and it dictates a certain set of economies around how big we make those. And so with that model of lift, this is really the way to go.
Other questions from social media?
This is from @AngryB8. For Mr. Bruno, are you investigating using an ACES upper stage to transfer people or cargo between these different space stations?
Sure, our long-range vision carries us to the Vulcan ACES launch vehicle. And for those of you who are not familiar with ACES, that's our next generation second stage that will replace the Centaur. It's a much larger stage with much greater capability. It can operate for an extraordinarily long period of time. Centaur today is the longest operating upper stage in the world. It operates for 7 to 8 hours. This new ASA stage will go for 7 or 8 days. And it will be refuelable and therefore fully reusable, something that no one has contemplated, a reusable upper stage. And the breakthrough idea there is that you don't have to bring it to Earth in order to reuse it. And so, yes, our concept is to eventually see a fleet of these ASIS upper stages, essentially space trucks, carrying cargo and ferrying things between destinations in LEO and in cislunar space.
Any other questions in the room? Frank?
Just one more question for Mr. Bigelow on what it would take to attach the B330 to the space station. Can you use the same berthing mechanism and expansion mechanisms that you're using on beam on the larger module? Is there heritage there that you can use, or are you going to have to develop some new stuff? And also, you talked a lot about testing. How long in terms of months, years of a testing program do you see for the larger module?
So in the docking or berthing process, there are two alternatives at least. One is to actually try using the Canadarm and berth the 330. That's a potential possibility. And the other is where we come in under our own power. And as far as to the particulars of the docking mechanism, I would guess that those would have to be enhanced because we're dealing with different mass levels than we are with the beam. So the 330 is 20 times the volume, and our view right now is that would come in at around 43,500 pounds. And I have to apologize, I forget the second part of your question.
The length of your test program to be ready to berth.
We never stop testing.
But when will you be ready?
We will be ready in terms of by 2020. We will have 2 vehicles ready for deployment, and as far as this whole testing regime is concerned. But beyond that, we're going to be continuing to test. We test other kinds of things that we innovate. So we essentially don't stop on our testing and will not stop on our innovation.
Hi, my name is Sloan Trugman from Aminet Insights. A lot of startups have a social component or a giving back, a mission. Is there anything in this partnership that we can see towards education, giving back to the community within this expansion? And is there anything that you're thinking about within space for the new job economy that you're giving into it?
So one thing that might be kind of fun is where we created an associate astronaut program. And we would love to see somebody be a sponsor of that with us. And it might be a process to where you're aware of the space camps. Huntsville has a huge space camp, and it's really popular and a lot of fun. Well, what if there were a substantial program to process kids through the ambition of eventually being an astronaut, and once they have gone through a long process, lasting years, they have to be over 21 years of age for contractual reasons and for legal responsibility reasons. But what if it were actually possible to have a really large pool of young folks who aspired to be astronauts, who might be able to fly for free, and maybe once a year one of them is chosen to be an associate astronaut. And they're going to be put to work when they're on board. They're not just there looking out the windows. They're actually going to have responsible duties and responsible positions of having to have obligations. But that would be one way we can give back, is having some kind of program like that. And I can think of a couple different companies that might be interested in that, where they already are dealing with, maybe through the entertainment industry, they're dealing with millions and millions of young people to start with. So it seems like, gee, why not, let's kick it up a notch and raise it to something like that.
So I'm a huge supporter of STEM. That's a great question. So 3 things. The first is we announced not too long ago a program where we're going to put a standard CubeSat carrier on every upper stage. This is no different. And that program will have free rides for STEM on every mission, in addition to the rides that are sold to other people. So this is no different. That's a part of our standard offering beginning just before this time frame. I will be looking for other opportunities to do exactly what you have asked about. But if we step back for a moment, let's take a look at the big picture. This project is allowing humanity to step off of this planet in a sustained and permanent way. I cannot think of a more important and a more impactful giving to humanity than that one.
Is that how you would define democratizing space?
So when I talked about democratizing space, that was a part of it. The other part of it is what we talked about when we said it will be something that involves many people, ordinary people, people who go to space because there's jobs in space, because they can go to space to have a better life.
Take one more question from social media.
This is actually from Irene Klotz with Reuters Online. She asked, does this partnership entail any financial support by ULA to Bigelow Aerospace?
So we're collaborating together with resources of technology and talent and exploring the future, as Bob explained to that earlier question and when he was at the podium. We don't talk about dollars in investment. And so, you know, you'll see as time goes by what this fully encompasses.
Rand Simbergen, Global Media. This is another technical question as a follow-up to my first one, because I hadn't realized you're going to attach 2 parts. One, I assume you're going to berth, not dock, so we have more, bigger access. And the other is there are different requirements for a free flyer than an attached system. So are you going to have, and if it's attached, will you have RCS, will you have thermal control, will you have power, or will you just get those from the station and have a different version as a free flyer?
So one of the concepts is that if it's attached to the station, it may be there for a period of time that could last some years, or it might be released from station and another habitat combined with it.
From Marcia Smith at Space Policy Online, can the B330s that will be ready in 2020 operate independently of the ISS if NASA says no, or do they need ISS life support?
You know, the B330s are designed to be an autonomous operation, and they are a space station. Each one is able to be its own space station. They need no other habitats, modules, or anything of the sort. They have their own propulsion systems, eclipse, avionics, etc., and they are an autonomous station, albeit a lot smaller than 1,100 cubic meters, but they are still large. They're 330 cubic meters each. So it only takes about 3 of those to equal the entire volume, almost, of the ISS.
Jeff Alpha Space News. Follow up on that previous question then. Since the B330s can operate autonomously, why not fly them autonomously and not deal with the technical and policy challenges of trying to integrate them to the space station?
That is really attractive, believe me. However, that isn't in the best interest of NASA. If NASA is going to, I mean, even if they were to fly at 28.1, degrees, and you have better access that way, naturally there are advantages. But the station offers probably the best choice of the 2 choices, and that way NASA can have more of a seamless operation, if you will, by having X-Base on station And they're not compelled to have to increase the size of their crew. They're not compelled to, we want to create more taxi traffic to and from because of commercial opportunities. So there would be more commercial traffic. But from NASA's perspective in saving money, it may not be that necessary to increase, certainly would not necessarily substantially to increase the amount of traffic to the station because of the 330 being there. They may want to haul up special kinds of hardware on occasion, in addition to resupplying consumables for the astronauts, and of course there are always a menu of spare parts and consumables and other things, experiments and so forth that NASA is flying. But it does make a lot of logistical sense for this X-Base to be on station.
Do you have any additional questions in the room? Greg?
Hi, Greg Avery with the Denver Business Journal. I'm curious, could you name the 4 taxi providers that you envision being available to take? And then have you had any meaningful partnership discussions with those 4 at this point?
So we look at Jeff Bezos with Blue Origin, potentially. We look at the SNC with Dream Chaser, Sierra Nevada Corporation. And we look at Boeing's with the CST-100. And we look at SpaceX with the Dragon. And yes, we do know those folks.
James Drew again with Flight Global. And so would this be an exclusive partnership with you with ULA, or are you open to any sort of launch provider who wants to get compatibility with you, to launch your expandable habitats?
Well, ULA provides a unique situation. They have the only launch vehicle with the appropriate fairing size that can accommodate our 330.
In the future?
Well, in the future, we like, our policy and our habit has been to maintain relationships for long periods of time. We don't like just short-term relationships, and we're not flippant about relationships. So my own personal philosophy is to maintain relationships for a long period of time.
Did you not have a good relationship with SpaceX when you
With SpaceX, they do not have the capability with the fairing size that's necessary to accommodate the 330, so that's not even a choice.
Question from social? To follow up on the kind of long-term relationship from @DIY Gary, what is the overall goal of this partnership between ULA and Bigelow Aerospace, and what steps are you looking to take to get there?
You mean other than trying to make a hell of a lot of money? I think that there are a lot of challenges here, and when you're trying to do something really novel like this, it isn't simple. The odds are huge. It's going to be a struggle. There are a lot of chefs in the kitchen, and that always makes it tough. There are a lot of people to try to satisfy, and so this is not going to be any kind of a simple situation. And we're going into this with the philosophy that we're going to have to work together and develop the satisfaction within NASA and the international partners, and then I think also the markets. But there are such a number of commonalities here in terms of benefits that the logic really says this is something that ought to be done.
I talked about the lofty long-term goals, but let's talk about something a little bit closer. This is a fundamentally new mission in space. We haven't had one of those in probably 20 or 30 years, arguably. So this is creating new things to do in space, making the space economy larger. That in itself is an exciting goal.
Hi, Miriam with Mashable again. I am just curious, do you envision tourists flying up to the station to stay in the B330 if it is attached? And if not there, then if there is a free-floating one, I mean, is that where they would go, or are tourists sort of not a part of this? Are you talking more industry?
So we call them amateur astronauts. Yes, we have opportunities for short-term stays because sometimes you don't want to have to, be away from your job and your career for months and months at a time. So there are scenarios where it could be a week or two, and there are scenarios where it could be 45 days or 60 days. And this would be applicable to if we're on station, or if it were a free flyer, we have more latitude to accommodate those kinds of things. So if we were flying a cargo mission, then we could accommodate probably an amateur astronaut or two, where we know that that cargo vessel is going to be turning around and going home quite soon. And it wouldn't be that one because we rotate the lifeboats, right? So, but there's also different. I think what you might see is a transition where people are able to invent and create their own income streams to compensate for what they've paid for that amateur astronaut experience. So it's not just I think we've seen a precedent on the last couple of folks.
Any further questions in the room?
I have a request. That'd be to have the two of you standing on either side of this to photograph you.
We will certainly do a photo op when this conference runs up. Any further questions? If not, thank you very much for joining us today. I wanted to let the media in the room know that we have a special thing back there for you. We did a 360 video of one of our launches, and we have a cardboard viewer back there, so you can download the app and get the really cool experience of watching the launch in 360. And there's also a flash drive back there with all the information from today for you as well. Thank you.
Okay. All right.